Sirens, Slammers, and Service, a podcast for female first responders by female first responders. My name is Nikki Cluche, and I will be your host. As a former correctional officer in Alberta for almost 2 decades and the founder of Blue Line Fitness Testing, which provides law enforcement fitness testing and first responder wellness workshops, I started this podcast as a way for female first responders to share the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of their daily work. I want to showcase the unique perspectives, skill sets, and personalities that women bring to a first responder career and share their stories. So get ready to laugh your ass off, learn a whole bunch, and be inspired by some pretty badass women. Let's go. Welcome back, guys. Oh my gosh, can you believe it? We are wrapping up season 6 today, and holy shit, guys, I saved a banger for the end. I am so pumped about this episode. Like, I was pumped before, but now I'm even more pumped having kind of had the opportunity to chat with her before we got online. Today, I have the honor and privilege of interviewing Anne-Marie Lambert. Anne-Marie is currently the Director of Security, Fan Experience, and Parking with the Oilers Entertainment Group with Rogers and Ice District. So literally just lived through the last 3 months of like absolute gong showness with the Oilers running for the Cup. So we're going to delve into that. Prior to that, however, Anne-Marie was also the Director of West Edmonton Mall Security for 3 years. And before that, she was a former CSIS intelligence officer for 14 years. Like, it's just unfreaking believable the amount of awesome experience this woman has. So without further ado, let's introduce her. Anne-Marie, welcome. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
I am so pumped. So we did try and organize this. It's highly entertaining. So I was connected to you through Nicola, who we had on earlier in the season talking about West Edmonton Mall security and dispatch and things like that. And so we connected back in April or even March maybe. And I was like, hey, I want to get you on. And you're like, yeah, okay, sounds great. We tried to set up a couple days. And then you were like, I'm in the middle of playoffs and I just cannot right now. So can we reschedule? And none of us knew that the Oilers were going to make this miraculous run to the end, to the very freaking end, right? And I said this before we started recording, every game I would think of you and think, oh my God, this woman, she's got her hands full. Like, she's got Ice District she's dealing with. She's got Rogers. And not only like home games, which would be a gong show, but like we had the open showing for fans when it was away games. So like that must have been crazy. And so we finally were able to, I reached back out a couple weeks ago and, hey, we're out of the playoffs now. Your life has maybe settled down a little bit. Let's jump on this. So thank you for taking the time. I definitely appreciate it. And I will say to our listeners, what is super crazy is that I just found this out. I thought Anne-Marie had been doing this job, like this director of security, for a little while before playoffs. But no, guys, she only started there 3 months ago. So literally 1 week before the playoffs, and then got thrown into the playoff chaos. So I definitely want to delve into this. I think it's insanity. But yeah, like, I mean, I've been doing all the talking. I want you to say hi. How
Hi.
are you? How's your day been? What have you been doing?
Good. My day today is actually all about budgeting and staffing numbers. So we're doing a bit of a reorg in my unit. So I'm looking to hire more. So I'm in the process of hiring, but also doing some budgets and staffing. So it's certainly not as fun as being at all of the Oilers Stanley Cup final games and watching all the cool concerts that we had during that time. But it's kind of a part of your job when you get to that director level.
Yes, for sure, for sure. Well, I want to delve into that because I agree that it's definitely a change to, what we do as we move up through the ranks and kind of moving away from that frontline stuff and getting a little bit more into the kind of administration stuff. But how did you get into like all this? Like, so going back, we're 20 years of experience now. So going back, getting into CSIS, becoming an intelligence officer, kind of what led you in this direction towards law enforcement, first responder, that type of stuff?
So I went to University of Saskatchewan, and actually my first degree is in biochemistry. So I really was very science oriented. And then during my last year of studies, we learned how to sequence DNA. And I thought that was like the coolest thing ever. So this was like, late 1990s. So it's starting to become a really big thing in terms of criminology to use DNA analysis. And so I was going to work in a lab. Actually, the RCMP has forensics labs all over the country. And I went for a tour and they said, yeah, you need like kind of a PhD pretty much to get in right now. And of course, I was young and didn't want to wait. So I thought, oh, there's got to be some other way around this. So I went to Simon Fraser University. They started a criminology forensics program there. And they brought over a biology professor. Her name is Dr. Gail Anderson. And she's a forensic entomologist. So she does time of death by bugs. And so I just went meaning to do a 1-year, just like an add-on diploma in criminology. And I loved it. So I did 2 years and got my another bachelor's in criminology. And I met Gail and she said, I want you to be my grad student. And I said, I want to be your grad student. So we were like kind of two peas in a pod with the science. And so then I did my master's. And when I was doing my master's, just before I did my master's, I applied to get in the program, but it's kind of a highly sought after program. Although I had like kind of Gail lined up as my supervisor. I thought, oh, I need a plan B. Like, what if I don't get in here? What am I going to do with my life? So one of the girls that I went to school with for criminology applied to federal corrections. So I applied and got in. And I worked mainly casual. So I worked at Matsqui Institution, which is a men's federal jail just outside of Abbotsford. It's kind of inside Abbotsford. So I worked mainly casual because I could work nights and mark papers for when I was teaching, and I could do my thesis work and my homework. So it worked out really well. And I was there for almost 2 years, kind of just casual. I was full staff, like full time in the summer. And then I was getting kind of to the end of my master's, and I didn't know if I wanted to go on to do a PhD, but I knew if I did, I'd have to leave Simon Fraser because it's, if you don't, you need some variance in your educational experience. And so I applied. It was the program at the time was like through the federal government, and you could upload your resume and they would kind of link you to whatever department they thought was a good fit for you. And so I put in my resume, and then I got an email back saying, oh, we've matched you with CSIS. They, liked your resume. Do you want to keep going through the process? And I had to do a little bit of like digging and diving, like what actually is CSIS, because it was not super well known, and what was known wasn't really readily available at all. Like there was no internet, web page for CSIS at the time. So I went through the recruitment process, which took about a year. So I was still working, finishing my master's. Then I got hired on and had to transfer to, like, about a month's notice, I transferred to Ottawa for training. So you start your entry training there, which is 13 weeks. You become an analyst in Ottawa. And then that was about a year. And then you do your investigator training to go out in the field. So everybody starts as a bit of an analyst, at least at that time we did. So you start as an analyst, you do your investigator training, and then you get posted out to field office, like a regional office. And so I got posted out to Toronto, and I was an investigator there, supervisor. And then I'm originally from Saskatchewan, so my dad was ill. And so I asked for a compassionate transfer to Edmonton, which was the closest office where he was. So came out here, was supervisor of the counterterrorism unit in Edmonton, which is also Edmonton, Northern Alberta, Northwest Territories. And then got promoted to chief of the Edmonton office. So I had about 25 staff that worked for me, surveillance team, investigators, analysts. And after I was here for a little while, I had some challenges. My dad passed, I got divorced, I had 2 daughters, and decided to leave the service. I didn't want to move anymore. I had moved 3 times and my kids were pretty little here. So I ended up leaving after 14 years. And that was about, I think, 2014. Yeah, 2014 I left.
That is just, I'm sorry, I was like jotting notes because I'm like, there's so many things I need to come back to. Like, wow. Okay. So like, dude, you are one of the most interesting guests we've ever had because you've gone like so many different like routes and like it's so cool. Like, so like going back to university, like taking the extra stuff, like going and doing masters. Also, I'm going to ask very selfishly for an introduction to Gail Anderson because guys, guess what? Guess who I want on season 7? I want Gail on season 7 because holy shit, that would be the coolest thing ever.
Oh yeah. I can totally intro you.
That would be amazing. So like even just that study and like doing your masters and stuff like that. And I absolutely love how you also did federal corrections and I had no idea. Like it's just unbelievable. And what a great way to do it. When I first started in corrections, I worked with, he's actually one of the supervisors there now, but he did the same thing. He was going to university, he worked nights. And you're making basically a full-time, he was working like full-time-ish hours, again, especially during the summertime and working nights. And so, yeah, in between doing your rounds and doing everything else that you need to do, right? Like you're studying, you're doing like, it's such a great way to get through university and still get paid. And so like, again, great job on that and doing all that and working full-time through the summer and still being able to, like you said, grade papers and do that stuff. That's super cool. And just again, like that experience in working in, that kind of Indigenous side of things down in Abbotsford and getting that exposure, like just that entire different side of corrections that a lot of people don't know about, which I think is really cool. And then jumping right into, I love that it's just like, just put your resume in and let's see what happens. Let's just try it out. And then they're like, yes, you should join us. You should be an intelligence officer. Like, so super cool. 13 weeks of training. And I love that you went on a one month notice. Like, so you know what? I'm going to move from BC to Ottawa in 1 month and just like uproot my life and go. So how old were you when you were leaving for that training then?
I think I started with CSIS when I was 25.
Okay. And so kind of uproot your life, head to Ottawa, 13 weeks of training. And so when you're going through this training, obviously I'm sure it's changed a little bit since you did it then, but like, what are they covering? Like, is it like investigative basics? Is it, I'm like, obviously I think you're going through like, what CSIS does and what it needs, those aspects and things like that. But is there specific things as you're going through that training that lead you into that role, or is it just kind of generic and then you get out to that field office and it's like, okay, now let's start the real training?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, wanted to pop on here before we got into this next episode and let you know about a couple new rad ideas that we have for the podcast. So the first one is we have a survey up and I would love to know what you guys think about the show. I'd love your feedback. I'd love your ideas for the next season. And I'd just love to know what you like and what you dislike about the podcast. And I'm going to sweeten the deal with a $50 gift card randomly drawn from everybody that completes the survey. The survey is going to be in the show notes of all of our shows. So no matter what time you start listening to the podcast at, you'll get a chance to win that gift certificate. The second thing that we're bringing in now is the ability for you guys to leave us a voicemail. You guys can actually call into the show, leave us a voicemail, let us know what you think about the show. If you have a funny story you'd like to share from your time as a first responder, I would love those and showcase those on the show as well. So make sure you guys check out that voicemail feature. It's going to be in the show notes, and check out the survey. Make sure you get that chance to win that gift certificate.
That initial 13-week training is a lot of just like, what is CSIS? This is the HR department. This is how you get paid. These are your, this is what this group does. This is what that group does. The whole like orientation when you're starting a new job is just a lot longer and more involved. But it's a lot of analysis because everybody starts as an analyst. So you have that base analyst knowledge, and then you learn to become an investigator after. So basically, as an intelligence officer, you're supposed to be an analyst and an investigator kind of combined. And it might seem like antithetical because an analyst is more introverted, more studious, a lot of online alone work. Whereas an investigator, you have to be extroverted, you're out in the public, you're doing interviews in the community. So some people are very good analysts, very good investigators. Some of them have like, I'm a better investigator, not as good an analyst, or vice versa. So it's kind of strange. And I think they've modified the positions a little bit to recognize that people have different strengths. And, that's the whole strength finder, is that you don't have to be good at everything. You should play up to your strengths kind of thing. So I'm sure that's changed, and they've had some specialist analyst roles since then. I know they have. So, and then you work as an analyst basically in one of the departments at headquarters doing analyst work. So you'll receive information from an investigator in the field, and it'll be like information at that point. You'll take it back, their report, you'll analyze it. So what do we already have in our database? What do we know? What don't we know? Is there any gaps that need to be filled based on all of the reporting across Canada and overseas, for example, and from allies and partners? And then that will go to the government as intelligence. So it's information from the investigator, then you analyze it and it becomes intelligence, and then it gets passed on to the government.
Very cool. And so, and again, I know that a lot of the stuff that you saw, very obviously confidential and private and things like that, but is there so within, because I will say I admit complete ignorance on what CSIS does. I know I probably should know a little bit more of it, but like you said, when I started in corrections and stuff like that in my law enforcement career, CSIS did not have a webpage. And so I probably did not. And now it really does, and I can probably go look. But are we is it all international based work, or is it more national based? Like what exactly are the investigators investigating?
So essentially, CSIS investigates threats to the national security of Canada. So they're kind of, and I'm using like old terms from when I was in the service. So they've rebranded and changed and things. So, just keep that in mind, is like there's, counterintelligence, which is people spying on us. There's counterterrorism, where people are committing an act of terrorism. There's counterproliferation, where people are trying to, I say people, but it's like people are states. So it could be a group, it could be a person, it could be a state, trying to use weapons of mass destruction. So those are kind of the three areas that you would normally be involved in. My specialty was a bit counterproliferation, so the weapons of mass destruction, because of my science degree. So that kind of made sense. So you're investigating those threats, and Canada is very unique because CSIS is both a foreign and domestic service. So we are focusing on threats to the security of Canada. That could be an internal threat to the security of Canada. It could be an external threat to Canada. It could be an external threat to Canadian resources overseas, for example.
Yeah, like I'm just, as you're saying it, I'm like wrapping my brain around like weapons of mass destruction and like and this and like wow. Okay, so it's a much bigger entity than I kind of was envisioning, which is great. I mean, that's amazing. And so like how many, and again, this might not be something you can share, but like how many investigators and analysts do we have across Canada? Like we have offices obviously across the country. I would assume we probably have counterparts in other countries doing work, but how you said, you had a team of 25 in Edmonton, but how does that look across the country?
Well, I worked in Toronto office, and it was, I think, 350 in Toronto office. So, it depends on the amount of work and the resources that you need. Obviously, Toronto has a different threat perspective than Edmonton, for example. Edmonton has way more geographical area to cover, though, because they do cover Northwest Territories. So I went up to Yellowknife one time for work. So yeah, there's a very large contingent at headquarters, just that support staff, because there's you're out in the field doing all this investigation, but you have all this support staff that's supporting you as you're doing this work, be it through technical means or even just like payroll and, HR communications. Yeah, it's a big machine, because I think I want to say like 3,500 total employees. So.
Okay. And so when you're out, like you say, so you spent time in Toronto and then transferred to Edmonton. And then, sorry, what did before you became the chief, you became what in Edmonton?
I got promoted to supervisor when I was in Toronto. And then when I transferred laterally over as a supervisor. So you're responsible for either a program or a geographical area, for example. So I was this head of counterterrorism. So basically the supervisor of all the counterterrorism investigators here in Edmonton. And then I got promoted again to chief of the Edmonton district office.
Wow. Like, good for you, first of all. Bravo. That's freaking amazing. I love it. I love seeing women move up. So bravo for you. And then, and we kind of talked about this a little bit at the beginning, the change in what you work on as you move up through the ranks. So moving into the supervisor's role, obviously you get pulled back a little bit from that investigation, from that kind of, analyst style stuff, and then moving into the chief role. So when you were in the chief role, was there still any like frontline work you were able to do, or was it mostly like now you're doing admin, you're dealing with staffing, you're dealing with paperwork, you're dealing with budgets, etc.?
Yeah, it's mostly that higher level strategic, not so much the tactical on the ground, because I always would say like I had a chance to do that in Toronto, and so it was my investigator's chance to do that in Edmonton. So yeah, you've totally hit it on the head. You're doing budgeting, you're doing strategic planning, you're doing staffing, you're doing HR. I did do some liaison work with the RCMP or different services, because you try to have a one point of contact, especially with the RCMP, so that you have like one truth going back and forth, because we have to be really careful on information sharing.
I like that, one truth going back and forth. Amen to that, because holy Lord, I've done some joint stuff between corrections and stuff, and it's like you just need one dang voice that's telling you the truth. I completely agree with that. Okay, and so kind of going back to your like experience and just pulling probably from more of your time in Toronto, like what was one of your favorite kind of like projects to work on, or operatives that you got to do, anything like that? And again, obviously I know you probably can't divulge too much detail wise, but is there one that sticks out in your mind?
I was supervisor of one of the Africa units. So, in Toronto, the population is so large that you have, one country area, and then you kind of subdivide it into different, especially in Africa, because you have Maghreb Africa, which is like the French speaking Arabic in the north. And then you have, South Africa, who's an ally. Then you have some of the strife on the east part, like Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan. So I was supervising an area very specialized. It was like Maghreb Africa. So it was like French speaking Muslim countries like Tunisia, Egypt, Algeria, Morocco. And it's when things started to happen in Mali and Niger, when Al-Qaeda joined forces with some of the local kind of terrorist groups in that area. So they started to kind of up their game. And so I was supervising that area. And then we had a lot of issues in Toronto with Somalia with respect to Somali teenagers going back to Somalia to fight for Al-Shabaab, who's a terrorist organization. And they kind of joined forces at that point with Al-Qaeda as well. So they were pretty much very domestic and just perpetrating attacks in Somalia. But then their reach started to grow, and they did some attacks in Kenya and they had some strife with Eritrea and Ethiopia, like kind of the surrounding countries. They're Muslim, and a lot of the countries surrounding are Christian. So there's a lot of issues with respect to that. So we had a lot of teenagers going back from Toronto who had, immigrated or were born in Canada, and then going back to Somalia to fight. And for me, it was quite sad because, having been born in Canada, they felt a connection to Somalia because probably they didn't have a very good connection to Canada when they grew up or immigrated. And because it's so hard when you immigrate from another country, like the education system is not the same. The language is probably difficult. So, you're 16, for example, you get put into grade 10 or 11 and you just can't keep up. And so people end up dropping out of school. They get involved with gangs in Toronto, for example. And then you see some of the mothers, very powerful mother figures in that culture, stepping in and saying, okay, you need to find Allah and you need to go to mosque, which is good. However, then there's the potential for radicalization. And yeah, it was very sad because I remember one of the kids that went over, he passed away, not from fighting, but from like a dental abscess, because it's just like there's no care. It's not a very, like, it's been a kind of like leaderless country since the 90s. So yeah, it was very sad. So we kind of put more resources into that area just to look at doing something more. But it's very hard because that group is very distrustful of law enforcement as well. And we even see it here in Edmonton. I know that there's like 2 Somali police officers in EPS. And I remember when they hired the first one, I thought that was amazing because it's just super hard to break into some groups to let them understand the benefits of having someone in law enforcement as a role model for positivity. So I took over we called it a task force at the time, and I had about 10 investigators, and I kind of became a little bit of an expert on that area. So I did some speaking and some presentations. So that was kind of fun.
That's so interesting. And like, even just hearing you speak about the countries, it's like, it really kind of like reignites in me that need to teach my kids about other parts of the world, like to really just be like, like, and we do try in our house. It's one of the things, like be aware of what we have here in Canada, and that, like, again, dental work and things like that, like that's not a given in other parts of the world. And just even geographical, like, knowledge of these different countries, of which country aligns with which other country, which country's religion is this versus this, right? Just that kind of knowledge is huge, because otherwise it's very easy to kind of become ignorant and say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. That's happening in Africa. It doesn't matter. It's not affecting us here. But it is affecting us here. And it does affect the families that have immigrated here. It does affect. And if there is radicalized beliefs that come, or there is gang warfare that comes, it does affect us. And we actually had Rebecca Hunt, who's the security intelligence officer from Edmonton Remand. She was on a couple seasons ago. I can't remember if it's 5. And was talking again about there's a big uprise right now with Somali gangs and trickling in from Toronto and Vancouver. And so, like, if we don't think it actually is happening in our backyard, it really is. And like, to be aware of that, and to be able to support these kids when they're coming here, so that they don't choose that gang lifestyle. They don't choose, this funnel back to Somalia or, wherever, and then bring with them strife and trauma and things that come here. So yeah, I think that's very, very interesting. And so kind of moving out of CSIS, obviously, like, again, we changed careers for like a variety of different reasons. Again, lots of times it does come down to personal choices. And, actually last week we had interviewed Susie, and she, same thing, had a 17-year career with the Canadian military as a military police officer. And it was exactly the same thing. The choice of, at some point, you work for the federal government, you're going to move, and her not wanting to move with her family and her young kids. So again, that personal choice to get out. and can be a very difficult decision, right? You're leaving a career that you really love and you're ignited by and you're passionate by. But I think that's something, again, as women, that we take a little bit more to heart, in that family becomes more important, and the need to have a stable home and stable home life and work-life balance becomes huge. And so leaving from CSIS, transitioning over into, did you go directly to a West Edmonton Mall security, or was there kind of some time in between there?
No, actually, I went to ATB Financial, and they kind of started a new position for me. It was at a time when in 2014, they were experiencing a lot of bank robberies, and they wanted to figure out how to like mitigate the risk, because they do have a lot of big city locations, but they have a lot of very small rural locations. And just the way that they were set up and the police response time, like in a small rural community and the bank gets robbed, RCMP take a long time to get there. I mean, no shade on them at all. It's just, it's a large geographic area.
Yeah.
And it might not be, a robbery that's already occurred is not potentially something that they have to deal with immediately. And the weapons that they were using were a lot of like sawed-off shotguns and stuff. So, quite a different profile of a robbery in a rural location than an urban location. So I started doing that, and I was under the risk department. So it was really great because I got to learn a lot about like risk assessments and 3 lines of defense and all of those things that I hadn't really explored with CSIS. So more of on a business side. So that was a really, really great learning experience. And Dave Mowat was the CEO at the time, and I enjoyed working with him. He would give me grief, though. He'd always wear his name tag out in public, and I would say, "Dave, take that thing off." But yeah, and he was like, "Anne-Marie, I'm for the people." I'm like, "You're killing me."
You're slowly killing me. It's funny that you say that, and I was going to give a shout out to ATB, because I met Dave Mowat at a awards banquet. He was being honored with the City of Edmonton Hall of Fame Award for business. And my friend, Jen Kish, who is an Olympian rugby player, was being honored for Hall of Fame sports. And so I was there to watch her and celebrate with her. And then they had kind of a gathering afterwards. And same thing, he had his name tag on. And I was like looking to switch banks. And I was like, I'm just going to go over and talk to this guy. I have to say, oh my God, the most down-to-earth, nicest. Like, I was like, I cannot believe I'm talking to a CEO of a bank right now. This guy seems like Joe Blow neighbor guy. And like literally that day, he was like, yeah, why don't we set up a call tomorrow? We'll talk about your business needs. We'll talk about your and I was just like, I'm sorry, you're the CEO and you're going to talk to me? Like, he was unbelievable. So I love that you got the opportunity to work like close with him. And I think it's hilarious. Don't wear your name tag out in public, please. You're killing me.
Well, there's a funny tie-in between the Oilers and ATB and me, because like I got to know Dave, and he's like one of those amazing people that remembers all of this stuff. So he remembered I had a daughter who played hockey. I have 2 daughters, but the older one plays hockey. And so at the time, I think I was working there, she may have been like 10 or something, or around that age, 10 or 12. And so I saw him at the Christmas party, and he said, "Oh, Anne-Marie, do you know that we sponsor the families for the Olympic women's hockey team?" And I said, "No, I had no idea. Like, we sponsor a lot of things." And he said, "Well, they're playing USA." And this was like in the lead up to the Olympics, I think. And he said, "I've got 2 tickets in this like theater box thing that him and Sandy, his wife, were hosting." And he's like, "Do you and Avery want to come?" And I was like, "Oh, well, of course, of course." So I bought these Canadian hockey jerseys for Avery and I, and we went to the game, and then we're sitting in this theater box. It's super cool. And then Kevin Lowe comes in, and he was like, "Who wants a tour of the Oilers dressing room?" And of course, my daughter's like, and of course, me too, like I'm fangirling at the time. And so we go for this tour, and her and Dave are like taking shots on the like fake ice in the dressing room, and we're taking tons of pics. And yeah, it was super fun. And then I said to Dave, like, man, I would really like to be like director of security of this, like with the Oilers. Like that would be super cool. And he's like, well, maybe I'm not going to let you leave. And then we were joking, laughing. And then like years later here, maybe 10 years later, yeah, I'm director of security at the Oilers. So
it all comes full circle. Oh my God. That is so neat. Oh my goodness. I love that. I love that. Okay. And so with ATB, then transitioning out of that and moving into director of WEM security, how did that come about?
Oh, I had a couple little jobs in between. Nothing with me is ever like a direct. It's always like, where can I grow and learn? And so I did some cybersecurity stuff at ATB, and I was at Canadian Western Bank doing IT and cybersecurity governance. So I was just looking for different positions that were going to challenge me and that I could learn from. So then, so I went from IT governance and governance, risk and compliance with CWB during COVID to West Edmonton Mall security during COVID. So I started there 2020 September. So I was in the thick of COVID. I don't think I knew what my team members looked like for like a year later until everyone took off their masks. So
Totally. Yeah, that's hilarious because I'm totally with you on COVID and the whole like, I don't know what you look like. I don't know what like what? Oh, you have more than your eyeballs? Awesome. Okay, great. So starting at West Edmonton Mall, I mean, again, same thing, jumping in directly into that director role. So taking over staffing, that again, we're talking about kind of steep learning curves, which you seem to be like the queen of. Well done.
No doubt.
How did that come in? Because like obviously West Edmonton Mall was shut down for quite a long time, as was the world. And then trying to learn the processes, learn the staff, learn like all of that. What was that like to navigate?
I was the first female director and I was the first external hire director. So it was a lot of trust building at the beginning because I had never been a like we call at WEM, we called them security, not guards, but agents, because I think guard is like very one-dimensional, and what a security agent does is more than just, standing like a pylon in a place, because they expect a lot from WEM security and they're very well regarded. So building that trust with the team, because, I'm coming in new, it's COVID, people are just coming back to work. It's, stressful, intense. And then we had all of these things we needed to enforce, like mask policies and directional traffic. You can only walk on one side of the mall and the other way on the other side of the mall. And, vaccine cards to be able to eat in the food courts and all of that stuff. So it was a lot of angry people. So I did notice that was super challenging. And I was called like so many different names, or, I was infringing someone's charter rights. And I was like, well, that's not really true. Me personally, I'm not,
Yeah.
Or, we're enforcing these bylaws that are difficult to enforce, or you might not even believe in it. Like, not saying that I didn't believe in it, but like one of them was that we couldn't have seniors doing walking, because they would come to the mall in the morning bbefore it opened and walk and then grab coffee as a group and socialize. And we couldn't do that, which is disappointing because, on, the levels for seniors, like just that human interaction and socializing and exercise, especially during the winter. So it was a difficult time period. Yeah.
Yeah. That is, I found, because I'm a fitness instructor and same thing, I teach aquafit to older, an older population. And that was a huge thing that we heard from them, and they would message us individually as instructors, like, but we just need to see each other. And I'm like, I want to see you too. Believe me, I get it. I miss seeing you every week too. But and especially just because it's an older population, they were so at risk and it was just so scary. Right. And it's so crazy. Like, how we can forget how that was like part of our lives. Like I just literally, until you were talking about like vaccine requirements to eat in the food court, I'm like, holy fuck, I forgot that we had to have that. And like walking one way down and then coming like, you totally forget about all that stuff that we did. I love that the world was just like, let's just pause on that. Let's just ignore that happened for 3 years and we're just going to jump right back into real life. Oh my
Totally.
gosh. And and again, like I think, like from the correction side of things, obviously within the jail, and I will say I was not working in corrections at the time of COVID. I'd already started Blue Line, but hearing from my coworkers and stuff, like a lot of the stuff was interior in that, it was within the facility. And so it was policing within the facility. There wasn't a lot of public interface. And I always, think about the first responders that were interacting publicly. And I just think, what a fucking nightmare, because they took the brunt of people. Yeah, you're infringing on our charter rights. It's you, specifically you personally in that uniform. You're the piece of shit that's not letting, right? And it's like, dude, they're just doing their goddamn job. They're just trying to live their life and also not get COVID from you. So they're just trying to be safe and like be able to go, home to their families at the end of the day. So I don't envy that at all. I think that would be definitely one of the most challenging things and one of the most challenging time periods too, to have to take on. That's just crazy. So within those 3 years, because again, going back to that episode with Nicola, a lot of things changed when you were in that role, which is phenomenal. And I love to hear that. I love to. So what was some of the things that you rolled out? What were some of your kind of initiatives that you wanted to bring in that role?
One of the big things was diversity. So I wanted to increase the diversity of the security force there. And I mean, kudos to West Edmonton Mall. They fund that security program really well. It's very well known, like nationally. It's super professional and, a great machine. There's always ways that you can improve. Certainly coming out of COVID too, there was a bit of, I think Nicola talked about it, like a little bit of a rift between squads and dispatch because they just weren't allowed to socialize like they had previous. So there was some, rebuilding relationships there and breaking down silos. But the main one was diversity. So we have such a diverse population in Edmonton, and I don't think our security force at the time represented that. And you can see it in the way that the Edmonton Police is recruiting right now as well. It's the same type of initiatives. So we did end up increasing the diversity, establishing a really good pipeline with Edmonton Police for recruiting. So getting our agents into EPS, and then anybody that EPS finds that needs a little bit more experience, we would take them on as security agents. If they were on like a 2-year deferral, they'd work for a couple of years and then get into the service. And I would cry a little bit every time I lost somebody, but in a good way, because, it's their lifelong dream to become a police officer. So who am I to stop that? But it was good because there was some consistency. And if some of the, agents were having trouble or needed some help with the recruiting, myself and my staff sergeants were able to kind of do that bridge because we had a good relationship with the recruiting team. So, and a lot of little things like some, meaningful statistics in order to get more resources and some technology upgrades. So
that's awesome. And it's totally true. When you're the manager and you start losing people to other agencies, I was the same, because when I was acting DDO or, DDO at REMA, you'd have those really good staff that would come in and they'd say, because I went by my maiden name, Miss Thompson. And I'd be like, no, don't even do not, I know what you're coming in here to talk about. And they'd be all sheepishly slinking in. Well, I just wanted to tell you personally. I'm like, I don't want to hear it. Nope. You are ruining my day right now. I don't want to hear it. But it's exactly the same thing, like you said.
Yeah.
When you hear that they've got on with RCMP, you hear that they've got on with EPS, or that, you can't begrudge somebody that, and it's been their dream. But at the same time, I would just be like, but also, I hate your guts right now. I hate you so much. I hate you so much for leaving. I hate you so much.
It's funny because I'm on the Edmonton Police Commission. So I'm actually vice chair this year. And so I end up seeing them in their graduation ceremonies because I try to go to most of them. And I always rib somebody from EPS, be like, there's 3 WEMS, ex-WEMS security, there's 2 ex-WEMS security.
Yes.
And then everyone now looks at me like in the ceremony when they, read off where they used to work. They're like, oh, another one, Anne-Marie. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, yes,
So
exactly.
I get to see them on the police side too, which is quite nice. And then I get to see them, succeed. So
that's awesome. I love that. And I like how you kind of talked about bringing in statistics and kind of analysis into, because a lot of times what we have to do in our roles is, moving through kind of the first responder and up into management, is justify our work, justify why we need more staff, why we need more technological advances, why we need more partnerships, whatever. And a lot of times I found, especially when I was in that role, it's really hard to do that and also still run your day-to-day ops. It's really hard to find the time off the side of your desk to be like, we need 4 more staff to do this, this, and this, while also being like, I don't have those 4 staff and I still have to juggle all these things, right? So I love that you were able to bring in that kind of analysis, that's the statistical support, I guess, for the initiatives that you wanted to run through. And then it was supported and it was rolled out. That's phenomenal. Like that alone, if you can say at the end of your career, I was able to bring in more staff or new technology, like woot woot, you won. That's a victory.
A lot of people have like anecdotal stories about security, like, oh, I called security and they didn't respond to me, or they were so long responding, or this and that. And so I would hear all these stories all the time. And so we had a really good program that would, catalog our reports, and our report writing was really well done, like very high quality. And so, but we had all these reports, and then, but what from all of these reports? And so then we started to use Power BI to export the data into, to be able to say, like, what's our dispatch time, call response time, call completion time, all that kind of stuff. So then when someone would say, oh, you guys never respond, I'm like, well, actually, we do, and we do well, and be quiet.
Yeah. I love that. And zip it. That's awesome. Okay. And so then from there, so you basically made your stamp on West Edmonton Mall security, left a legacy. Well done. And now have transferred over, I guess not transfer, but we're successful in becoming the director of security, fan experience, and parking with Oilers Entertainment Group. So like we said, full circle, 10 years later. So cool. And what a wild ride it must have been the last 3 months for you. I cannot believe you started like 1 week before playoffs. I'm just, oh my God, it's insane to me. So how has this been? Like, again, what a steep learning curve, what a gong show to roll into, but how's it been?
Playoffs are an anomaly because we run 3 venues during playoffs. So we run Rogers Place with the game, that's busy enough. And then we were running Fan Park with a watch party there, and we were running Plaza with a watch party there. So a lot of different hockey teams will just have the arena, but we have the arena plus 2. And then even on away games, as you were saying, we had watch parties. So the watch party was going on inside, and plus the watch parties outside. So you have 3 watch parties. So you pretty much have 3 venues running, pretty much every other day. Games were like every other day. So there's just no break is kind of the thing. And people were just running on exhaustion and stress and excitement all rolled into one, because we hadn't done that, 4 rounds run in 18 years. And not at Rogers Place. So, the last would have been at, Rexall or Northlands. So it was a whole nother story, and just the amount of staff that you have to use. So, we have our own internal staff. So you have fan experience staff who are taking tickets or being hosts at the top of sections. We have crowd managers, outside managing lineups. you have police, you have paramedics, you have external security companies, because you just don't have enough people physically to fill those roles in those three venues.
Mhm.
And then just all the crazy that comes along with, you know, a long run. And Edmonton fans are very, very loyal and
Passionate.
excited. And I remember one of the last, I think it was game 6 of the 4th round, and Luke Gadzik, I think his name was, he's TSN reporter, he's a former Oilers hockey player. They're like, he wants to do a media hit in the crowd at the plaza. And I was like, are you kidding me? And they're like, we want people to be like quiet when he's talking. And I was like, oh my God, you people, like, oh.
Okay, good luck with that.
Yeah. So I remember standing, and everyone was busy. So I was standing beside, and TSN, he was on TSN, I guess. And I was trying to stay out of the shot because I don't like being on camera or pictures or anything like that. And so before he starts, I'm saying to the crowd, we are respectful. We are going to listen to what he says. And we are not like Vancouver. Okay. And they're like, yay. And then it's funny because they're like, you have to the crowd, you have to be quiet. And then when he's like, does this little thing, then you can erupt. And boy, did they erupt. But yeah, it was like, how do you quiet a crowd so they can do a media hit in the middle of a place that has 6,000 people in it, and it's game 6, and it's like,
I love that you just mommed them. Okay, we are going to be kind and respectful and quiet. And 6,000 people were like, okay, we will.
okay. And then, well, the big thing is like, we're not Vancouver, because Vancouver fans are notoriously a bit like rowdy. So even when they play here in Edmonton, like, it's a bit rowdy. So
Yeah. Oh my, I can't like, as you were saying, like breaking down like the different locations and the different things going on, I was thinking to myself, how did they have enough staff? How did you like, did you have like, I mean, obviously you're saying, you know, contracted externally, but like that's insane, because like even when, so like I was working at the jail in 2006 when they were on their last run, and I was working in our admissions and discharge area, and we every game night we would have to clear out the tanks because we knew that there would be something coming from somewhere, right? We knew EPS, the paddy wagon was coming, and it was going to be full. And then when that riot broke out on White Ave, it was like, we were like, oh my God, like mass exodus. Let's get rid of all of the, you know, like get everybody out of the basements. We're ready for it. So, and like, that's just us. Like, I can't imagine navigating it at the ground level and trying to freaking organize that all. Like the staffing alone, it's just insane. That's insane to me. But you made it through. You did it. It was, like I said, every game I thought of you. And I was just like, I wonder how she's doing. Like, oh my God, it must be so crazy and so stressful. But you did it. You made it through. And so, like, again, chalk up like massive victory for you. Like, you did great. There was no incidents. And like, from everybody that I've heard from, it was a great experience. They had no issues. They were like, again, fans were respectful and kind. And for the most part, you know, like, I mean, obviously you're going to have the one-offs, but everybody said, you know, security did a great job. So kudos to you and your staff for doing an amazing job. And now you're into this reorg with some hiring and some stuff going on like that. So I know we're kind of running long on time. We've talked a lot, just tons of information, but what does that look like for you? If we have listeners, I know we have a lot of new listeners that are, you know, just getting into this first responder kind of world. What would that look like for them? What are you looking for experience and things like that? What's that recruiting process going to look like?
So we have like 24/7 building security coverage, and I'm going to try to augment that with all the 3 locations, and we're going to be running more things outdoors. So we have a concert, Pumpkin Drublick, that's coming up mid-August. We always have like lots of concerts within Rogers Place. So we have a lot of part-time staff too. So we have part-time event staff that work on the fan experience side or on the security side. We have full-time building security. We have managers and assistant managers that manage all of the staffing and the deployments and the resourcing. And we kind of pride ourselves on our fan experience here at Rogers Place. We put a lot of effort into how the customer experiences everything, even from like purchasing tickets, just like to walking in, to, you know, being greeted at the lineups, you know, all of that stuff. So my staff put a lot of effort into how we make that an amazing experience for Oilers fans and people, anyone attending a Rogers Place event. So yeah, and then also you kind of realize having that big long run. So I mean, that hockey season lasted from September to almost July. That's a lot of hockey and events and everything else that goes along. Is that, oh, maybe we need some more staff, because it's, yeah, you get a little bit burnt out at the end. I remember, you know, when it finished, I think I just did nothing for about 3 or 4 days. And then we had NHL club meetings in Boston, and I presented on our security experience during the playoffs, which was fantastic and a lot of fun. And then I came home after that, and I remember I took like 3 days, I think, and I did all that stuff that I didn't have time to do, like go to the dentist and get a haircut and, you know, that stuff that, and I did feel a bit bad because I did neglect my husband and my kids and my stepsons during that period of time. Luckily, they're very understanding and very loving, and they appreciate the hockey tickets and the concert tickets that I get. So I do try, you know, I apply them a little bit with stuff, but I do know I was not super present. And I mean, I'm lucky my daughter is 18 and my other one's 14. So they're quite independent. But yeah, I know my husband is like, when is this going to end so I can see my wife again? So.
Yeah, nobody, like you said, nobody knew that we were going to go on this miraculous run and like take it right to the end. And it's funny because you're saying, you know, like how exhausted the staff were, like fans were exhausted. I was like, oh my God, another hockey game? Like I need to clear my schedule again for the hockey game. So yeah, I can't imagine like working all of it. Cause like, that's the thing too, is like, every time you were watching a hockey game, you guys were staffing somewhere, because there was there was, even when it was away, it wasn't away. There was still stuff going on. So yeah, well done. And your family gets you back now for the summer. So that's amazing. And again, the little bribes. I have hockey tickets and I have concert tickets. So what would you like?
I'm going to Greece with my daughters in mid-August for a couple of weeks. So that's going to be our like family girl time together. So yeah.
Good. Oh, well, I hope you have an amazing trip. That's awesome. That's so good. Okay, well, so to wrap up then, like I always end up with some rapid fire questions. I love to kind of hit my guests with that stuff, but I just like, there's so much that you've talked about. I'm like, oh my God, my mind's just reeling with all the different things and places you've been and experiences you've had. It's just amazing. So I'll go back, and this one I'll kind of caveat with just the last 3 months, because I think it's really it'll fit really well. But what was your favorite food or snack that kept you going during the most chaotic 3 months of your life?
So we ate a lot of food trucks. So whatever food truck was in any of the locations, that's what we ate. And they had a Tim Hortons truck in Fan Park, and it was like free coffee. So that was like we were very happy about that. Yeah, we ate like complete food truck dinners pretty much every other day. So
I love it. Free coffee. Please keep me going. I need it. I absolutely need it. Okay, good. And food truck. Any favorite from a food truck?
No, it was actually more like which was the shortest lineup, so I could eat as fast as I possibly can and get back to work. So
well done. Well done. I like that. Okay. Going back to kind of your time within CSIS, what was your favorite kind of like tool or piece of equipment or kind of information tool, I guess, that you got to utilize?
Oh, this is going to be funny because it's like one that's not happy to utilize, but I had a pager when we first started. Yes. And it was like this gigantic black plastic thing. And then we used to joke that we looked like drug dealers because we had these pagers. And then probably my daughter will listen to this and she'd be like, what the hell is a pager? But
it's funny you say that because I was in public the other day and there was like a courtesy phone. And this mom was trying to teach her like 10-year-old kid how to use this courtesy phone. And she's like, do you hear the dial tone? And he's like, what? And she's like, the dial tone. And I like stopped and I like actually had to stop and think and be like, there are people in this world that don't know what the dial tone is. And I was like, oh my God, where's my walker and my pantaloons? Because this is how fucking old I am. Oh my God.
I know.
It was, that was a moment of like, oh my God. Okay, I like it. The pager, that's fantastic. What's the coolest location you've ever been able to work at or been to kind of on a job?
That one I can't really talk about.
Okay.
So I will, but on holiday, so I do a lot of traveling with my family. It's like something I used to run track and field in university and for many years. And so I got to travel a lot with that. So I'm continuing that. And I took my daughter to Morocco, my older one, when she was 2. So she was not quite 2, so that we didn't have to pay for the second, the third seat with her dad and I. But it was just a very welcoming place. And, I was working at CSIS at the time, so I kind of had some knowledge of different cultures and stuff. But that one was super eye-opening with respect to how loving everybody was to this 2-year-old. So she has blonde curly hair and these gigantic blue eyes. And so she was a bit of a novelty in that sense. And, we would go up to pay for something and they would say, no, it's the baby, you don't pay. Like we bought her like this little bracelet and they're like, no, you take it for the baby, don't pay. And we have like tons of stuff. And we were going to one of the mosques in Casablanca and we were walking and she was getting kind of ornery. So we stopped for a snack and we had got a yogurt for her, but we had no spoon. And they just gave us like a silver spoon, like a real spoon. And we're like, well, can we bring it back? They're like, no, you keep it for the baby. Like, yeah, it was eye-opening how wonderful and caring and loving they were towards her, and everyone wanted to hold her. And
I love that. And it's crazy that you say Morocco because you're the third person this week that I have talked to that is either gone to Morocco or is planning to go to Morocco like within the next like 6 weeks. So that is so cool. I'll have to have an offline conversation with you about it because it's on my bucket list to go there. I think it would be just
totally
absolutely unbelievable trip. So that's awesome. I love that. Very, very cool. Okay. Well, I mean, again, today you have blown my mind like repeatedly. I'm in awe of you as a human and just all the things you've done and the experiences you've had and just your knowledge and your, you're a fascinating person. So thank you very much for being on the show. I feel very honored that I got the opportunity to kind of chat with you this last little bit and get to know you. And so any last words for our listeners?
No. But there is something that I keep saying I have 2 daughters and they're super important to me. And one of the things I just kind of always thought with them is that, women in kind of this corporate security role, we don't, we're making strides now, but it still is a bit difficult. It's definitely male dominated. And certainly, not being a police officer, having that kind of different law enforcement-ish experience, it makes it a little harder for people to wrap their heads around it. But what I always wanted to instill in my daughters is that you can be a mom, you can be, you can have a job, you can have a career, you don't have to have children, you don't have to get married, but, you just do something for yourself and do what you love. And then the money will kind of come from it, I think. So.
Love that. What an amazing piece of advice. That is absolutely 100%. Like, yes, bang on. Do what you love. The money will follow. You will be happy. And yes, I love that. That's so good. So good. Dropping wisdom bombs over here. Well done. Well done. Absolutely love that. Well, I hope you have an absolutely amazing rest of your day. I hope you have a beautiful vacation in Greece. Go enjoy yourself, relax. You have fucking earned it. So take that time. And yeah, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in, listening, giving me your time, your energy, and your attention. I completely appreciate it. Make sure you check out our next episode with another badass female first responder anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook at bluelinefitnesstesting.com. I hope you stay safe, keep your head on a swivel, and watch your six.